Hello there, I'm Julian. Nice to meet you all. I guess we're missing a few because people were out drinking last night. I know it's like, it's not, the Ukrainians don't have a monopoly on drinking. It's where I come from, they do that too. Like most of the speakers, they seem to have gone out and had a really good time, and I can see it in their eyes this morning. They had a heavy night. So yeah, my name's Julian. I am a freelance software engineer. I have a website, reactrocket.com, where there's tutorials there and stuff like that, if you want to reach out. And I specialize in building editors. And that's what I've come to talk to you about. So, editors like this is a client, well, for companies like this. This is a client of mine. They're called Tetra, and they make a wiki editing software that integrates with Slack, or things like Google Docs. You know Google Docs, Medium, or Twitter has an editor as well. Notion, anybody heard of Notion? The task management collaboration platform. They have, as part of their core product, an editing experience. Now, why should you care about this? Well, a couple of reasons. Editors are pretty much everywhere. Like, in fact, you're using an editor every day, or you're building editors every day. This is the most basic form. And the demand is increasing, as well as the investment in companies that build editing experiences. For example, Webflow is a really good example. Who's heard of Webflow? Can I have a show of hands? All right. But you've heard of, I guess you've heard of Wix, right? Yeah. They're based here in Kyiv, aren't they? Yeah, that's what oh, yeah, that was yesterday. What's his name? I forgot his name, but he was from Wix. That's right, the micro front ends. Yeah, so who's building editors? There are loads of companies out there that are investing in editing experiences and building editing experiences. One type being like a document editing and collaboration tools like Dropbox Paper, Confluence, Google Docs, email apps like Gmail, MailChimp, Campaign Monitor, the task management collaboration tools like Notion, Basecamp. I put Workflow on there because it's my favorite tool. If you have never heard of it, do check it out. Communication tools like Slack and Discord, social media such as Twitter and Facebook have editing experiences. Headless CMS products like Contentful and Zesty, publishing platforms like Wordpress and Medium, website builders and no-code are at the far end of the spectrum because they have the most complex kind of editing interfaces, and that's, for example, Squarespace, Wix, and Webflow. And the kind of editors I'm building for my clients at work is the latter half, so the more complex editors. Now, in order to show you the landscape of editors, I'm just going to go into some features, into some typical features that editors contain. So this is like a list of features that you typically have in editing experiences. Rich text being the most basic form, tables, embedded content, syntax highlighting being another thing. Collaborative editing. Excuse me. So if anyone used paper, Dropbox paper, or Are you familiar with the Google Docs collaborative editing experience? Yeah. If you edit the same document with a friend, you can see their cursor, right? Have you seen that before? That sort of thing is what I'm talking about. Other than that, file uploads, drag and drop functionality, and configurable layouts are other features. And so I just made a little chart to show how many features these editing features, these products employ to give, well, just to show like the spectrum of editing experiences, editing apps that you have out there. Like with content, like CMSs being at the low end of the spectrum, and no-code editors like Webflow being on the far right of the spectrum. So the higher the chart, the more complex, the more editing features there are. Now, let's zoom out for a moment. What is an editor? We're all familiar with that one. Everybody uses it. And then the next level up would be the text area. Most of you will have used that as well. And then it gets a little bit more complicated from then on. So the next step up, this is like the default browser feature that we use for editing for plain text, right? As soon as we step out of plain text, as soon as we want anything like those features that I've shown before, like rich text, like images, like embedded media, etc., we need something called content editable. Can I have a show of hands who's heard of content editable before? Yep, there's a bunch. Awesome. Right, so content editable. It was originally developed by Microsoft circa 1999 for a product called FrontPage. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. Basically, they needed to make their web content editable. And so they decided to implement this feature where you just slap a tag on an element, on a HTML element, and suddenly the element becomes editable. Other browsers, back then, IE was the dominant browser. So other browsers raced to implement this feature and copy it. But there wasn't a spec. There wasn't a standards body standardizing this kind of thing. Back then, all the browsers, if you've heard of the term browser wars, they fought against each other rather than working together, as they do now, to consolidate information and build standards. Right. So the funny thing is, it's 20 years later, and the standards body, the W3, is just in the process of writing a draft of this. So it's taken this long, and now finally they're working on it. And this is pretty huge. Like, since then, loads of companies have built editors with this technology, but it hasn't been standardized. It's only just been standardized now. And it's in draft, so that means it's not actually, it's not considered a fixed feature, it's not considered fixed spec. Right, so all these companies that are listed, most of their editing experiences are built with are like closed source. They're not using open source products. But there are open source products and tools that you can use out there. So I'm going to list a couple of those. So that would be a classic, Tiny MCE. They have a rich text editor, and that'll do for most of your, like if you need something out of the box ready to go, just a basic rich text editor. This does a bit more than that, but it's, if you want to configure it and need to configure it like I do with React applications, then it's not a great fit. And they have a premium product as well, where they host your content, etc. The Fruala being another kind of such an editor. It's a ready-to-go component that you can drop in. Personally, I haven't used it, and it's also, you need to buy a license in order to use it. Tricks, highly recommended. It's written by the developers at Basecamp. And as far as I know, it's the only in-browser rich text editor that has mobile support. And this is fairly new, by the way. The mobile support that they provide is achieved with a spec that's also in draft that's supposed to fix a lot of the browser inconsistencies when it comes to handling inputs. And the spec I'm talking about is called Input Events Level 2. Oh, this is WordPress. So Gutenberg, the new WordPress editing experience, is open source, and you can go and check it out. It's not a component that you can just use in your app or anything like that. It's the editor inside WordPress. It's like an app. It's an app in itself, and it's specific to WordPress. So I'm not sure how useful it's going to be to integrate with your product, but there's definitely some lessons to be learned there. And I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's a decent editing experience. It also supports all kind of content. It uses content editable, but in a very restrictive way. So it's not like the whole document is one content editable. They make each block a content editable, because content editable is like I said, an incomplete API. Some say a badly designed API. Also, if you look at the WordPress support, that doesn't paint a very nice picture to have like so many 1-star ratings, I guess. Sorry, WordPress. This brings me to Slate. Can I have a show of hands who's heard of Slate? Yeah. There you go. There's at least 2 I saw there. Slate is a really great open source product. It solves like pretty much every use case under the sun. It has a huge API. Many examples. It's built with React and has direct support for React, which is great, because that's what ultimately, if the product that I use doesn't work with React directly, if I can't use React to reach into the text fragments and the blocks to render stuff in there, then I can't really use it for my clients. So this is a really great tool, and there's a huge community around it. It's written by Ian Storm Taylor from Segment. He's been working on this relentlessly for years now, and as you can see, accumulated quite a community. The only thing, though, is it's still in beta, and so far, when I've tried to build solutions for clients, I struggled to get some features to work. It's improving constantly, though, so definitely keeping an eye on that. And the next, brings me to Draft.js. This is the project that I mostly build editors with for clients. It's written by Facebook. It's used in the Facebook editor, the status editor, and other products inside Facebook and internal products in Facebook. It's used at Twitter for the Twitter website. So to make at mentions work and hashtags and stuff like that. It's used all over the shop, and like I said, most of my clients use this project as well, and that's the project I use to build editors for them, mostly. Now, I maintained Draft.js plugins for a while. It's a project by Nick Graff, if you've heard of Nick Graff. Draft.js plugins is an ecosystem built on top of Draft.js to provide out-of-the-box functionality for editors built with Draft.js. It has a plugin system, and yeah, it's a great project. But the thing is, there are issues with Draft.js, and if you've not seen this blog post by Max Stoiber, I highly recommend it. It's a brave thing to do, really, to list out the regrets that you've made, the technology regrets that you have, and calling out the products that didn't work for you, etc. And as part of this article, he also talks about Draft.js, and it's been a struggle. I actually briefly worked as a freelancer with him to fix some of the problems on Spectrum. Who's heard of Spectrum here? Just by any chance? Spectrum.chat, Kyle. Hey, Kyle. Was the breakfast good? Excellent. Yeah, and as he outlines here, Draft.js hasn't really been working for them. And that's for a bunch of reasons, mostly because building editors and complex editing experiences is really hard, especially building open source tools for building editors, because there's just so many use cases. And Draft.js was really built for Facebook internally, for their product. So when they designed Draft.js, when Facebook designed Draft.js, they were thinking about their use case. And an open source tool is for many use cases. Anyway, so let me dive into why building editors is hard. This is how your typical document model looks like, right? It has blocks and text fragments. So this is how you'd reduce it to like a diagram. This is how you'd split it up. And blocks can also have block children, ideally, who, again, can have text fragments and other blocks. And this is also known as a tree structure. Now, you might be more familiar with, not binary trees, but I'm not sure how this type of tree is called, actually. Anyway, so this is the life cycle of an editor. You have your model, your view, and your event. When the user interacts with the view, an event gets fired. That updates the model, and updating the model re-renders the view. Makes sense? The thing is, because the model is a tree structure, updating the model is incredibly hard, because we don't, in JavaScript or any library that I know, have standard concepts for updating, or standard libraries for updating trees, especially not in like a one-dimensional. If you think about it, what we're doing is we're trying to update a two-dimensional structure in a one-dimensional fashion, because with such an update, this update can be a keyboard event, an input event, a mouse event, etc. We always have a selection, so a start and an end point, and then some content if we insert text or replace text, or no content if we remove it. Right. So this would be another shape of the same life cycle. So I've been thinking about this loads, and as in my spare time, I've been trying to kind of build my own framework, because I was so fed up with Draft.js and other projects. And I first tried it with building it like Draft.js or Slate.js with tree structures, and gave up a couple of times. It's one of those projects I started and stopped, like we do, you know. And then one day, I was playing around with the Visual Code Extension API, and came across this. And I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before, but it's incredibly simple. The change, this is the change object, like a text edit, a data structure that represents editing text. And with this, you can represent text insertions, you can represent text deletions, you can represent text replacements. And that's really almost other than changing the text selection, that pretty much sums up all editing operations that you can make. So VS Code gets away with this because the only thing it does is it operates on flat structures, on text, whereas we operate on tree structures, like Draft.js and all the other open source projects out there. Updating trees is super hard. Updating flat structures, super easy. Let me give you an example. So let's say I were to delete this bit. So I press delete. Yeah. That can be represented with this simple operation, just with slice. Slice works on strings. It also works on arrays, right? So then it dawned on me, what if there was an editor framework that actually had a flat structure as its content? That would make everything a lot simpler, and we'd move the complexity away from where it's really problematic. So in this model that I thought up, an event happens. We map that to an editing operation, update the editor model. Because it's flat, it's super easy. Then that flat structure, the editor model, we generate a tree from that, and we know how to do that. That's a solved problem. We have, like an AST would be one example. We know how to build tree structures from flat structures. That's a solved problem. And then we can render it to the view. And so this is the project that I'm working on with this new kind of architecture. And it's super fun. It's called Zettel. It's written in TypeScript. It's tiny. It has 0 dependencies. There's no immutable JS, which is used in a lot of the other libraries. It has a state module that can be used with other frameworks. So the view layer is actually very, very small. And the changes, and that's really the core of it, the promise of Zettel is that the changes are atomic. They're replayable and serializable. So first of all, let me say I've compared all these other frameworks. I am hugely grateful to the open source work that's preceded my work on this, and I couldn't have done it without looking through the source code of these projects and knowing people at Facebook and at other companies who build these products. It's been incredibly helpful, and I've borrowed concepts and in some cases copied code to use in my project. So quick disclaimer, it's not ready for use in production. Currently, I'm the only one who's working on it, so this is in its very early stage, this project. The architecture is also still in its, although the concept, this initial concept of a flat structure is fixed, everything around it is still in flux. I'm currently borrowing concepts from other frameworks, but that might change as the project continues to grow. And if you are interested in contributing and working with me on this, I'm really open to. Right, so let's talk a bit about the approach. Zettel is library, not a framework. The intention is that it is that it doesn't get too big for its own shoes. Right. Anybody heard of this talk? No? Show of hands? No? Oh, I heard someone ming. So Sebastian Mark, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but yeah, anyway. He gave this talk about the kind of the general architecture of React and the programming paradigms that they apply and that they're trying to follow. And that's something he calls minimal API surface. And I'm trying to use the same concepts here. Rather than creating a framework with lots and lots and lots of APIs, I want to enable people to build editing experiences with patterns rather than APIs, if that makes sense. So if you are familiar with both React and Angular, you know what I'm talking about. You know the difference. There's frameworks that have big APIs to solve common problems with. And then there's libraries like React that are based on simple patterns, minimal APIs that you can solve a variety of problems with. And that's kind of what makes React so powerful. And I'm trying to apply the same pattern at Zettel. So let's get to it. This is the change object, and it's like the core design feature of Zettel, and it's modeled after the VS Code object, the text edit object. It has a start position, an end position, and a value. So this is start and end are basically start and end, so the selection, and value is could be text, could be a block, could be a bunch of things. Right, so here's a naive implementation of change. Like as before, I'm using slice to concatenate 2 bits. It's very simple. That's really the core of Zettel, really, the entire idea. It's super simple. This is how you would change the selection. You'd give it an object like that. This is how you'd insert text. This is how you'd replace text. This is how you'd insert style text, a new block, inserting a custom block. So I'm going through these examples very quickly, but I'll go into more depth when I do some live coding in a bit. Yeah, so you hopefully kind of get the idea. Let me start up my editor and do some stuff. All this will be, by the way, later available on this website, Zettel.software. I haven't updated it yet because there's a couple of changes coming that I made for this talk specifically. All right, let's get to it. Okay. Can you see this well enough? Yeah? Great. Okay. There's also, by the way, oh, it's not running. I need to start it. Excuse me. Right. Also, this is an example that I built yesterday to show how changes work. So, where is it? Changes. So what I'm doing here basically is when I submit a change, I'm taking this input here, converting it to a JavaScript object, so passing the JSON, and then just using editor state.change and passing that. So this is the actual object. So let's, for example, change the selection. That's how you change the selection. Yep. If I pass a value, I'd replace the selection with this value, which is currently empty. And it has undo functionality and everything. And just as a simple example, I'm going to insert something. I'll probably need to look this up. Let me quickly look this up. All right, it's written in TypeScript, so everything is spelled out here. And this is my text character. I think this should work. Yeah, it works. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's build an editor. Goes without saying. So, yeah, I built this yesterday, and I have a copy of the final thing, just in case I screw this up. But first of all, let's have a look and show you around. This is where I'm using two packages here, mainly. Zettel core and Zettel React. Zettel core is the core, and React is the React view layer. I import the editor component from Zettel React and render it here. And up here, I import editor state and get block for index. Yeah, I will need that later. I'll explain all this. So, right. So first, I'm using, this is, I could simply use useState here, but I used something that's like a hook for persisting the editor state so that it doesn't all disappear when I refresh the page. But just ignore that part. Think of it as useState. So here's my state, right? And my editor state and my setter. And this is how I create an editor state from a JSON object. And then the API of the editor component pretty much works the same way as you would expect from any text editing component, like an input field or a text area. It has an onChange prop. The editor state prop is like the value prop. So that's where we hand over the state to the component. HTML attributes is, so everything in Zettel is completely configurable. You can, there's nothing that's set in stone, basically. And it's completely up to you how you render blocks, how you render text fragments, how you render styles. I'm going to show you the API for that now. Because it's written in TypeScript, you get auto-completion, which is great. And so I have a bunch of render props here. Render block is the one I'm looking at first. So that contains these props. And I'm going to just do this kind of thing. I always need to pass it the HTML attributes. And render the children. And that, because that bit is, Zettel needs to, in order to work, in order to map the selection between the states, using the browser API, etc. So, yeah. This can be what can it be? It can be all sorts of things. It could be anything, really. It could be a pre-tag. It could be a styled component. So let's make a styled component. Let's say this is a P. Are people familiar with styled components, by the way? Sort of. Yeah. Awesome. Styled components is great. Yeah, so this is to show that you can integrate with this with any kind of React library, really. That's the power, the beauty of it, really. So let's go crazy. There you go. That's that. Right, let's get that out of the way. Yeah, and so what I want to show you is I want to build something crazy, something different than your typical rich text editor or content editor. So I want to build a no-code editor, like a website builder, because I could use this technology to build anything really, because you can configure all these blocks and text fragments, and you can still edit them. That's the beauty of it. So these are some examples here. What I'm doing here is just, you could have a much nicer UI for this, but you can see I have some CSS here, yeah? And I want to be able to select a block and assign a style to it, or select a text range and assign a style to it. So that's what I'm going to build. Now, let's see if I remember this right. I have the copy to back me up in case I don't. Let's see if it's still there. Hold on. I hope so. Yes. Cheat. Okay. Let's hope I won't have to cheat. Right. So I've already prepared some of this. We have another state object, which I call styles. And yeah, so what I want to do is I want to associate a block with a style, one of these guys. And these are all saved in my styles object. So let's have a look at this. So this is the thing that displays the styles. Let's see. That has, oh yeah, onSelect style. That's the API. Right. I need to probably check it out quickly to see what that does again. Oh, there it is. So a string, okay, right, yeah. So when I select the style, I'm going to style the block. Now, in order to do that, I first need, so I'm updating a flat structure, like we said, right? That's my content model. Let me just show you quickly how that looks like. There you go. There's my value. And here you can see the beginning of the block is a character, as well as the end of a block. So it's like delimiters, like you'd be used to in programming languages, right? And from parsers and stuff like that. And the other types of characters are just that, characters. Text that I render. So what I need to do, like all the information, the styles and stuff are in here. So what I need to do is I need to get this, like my current block, and style it. I'm sort of running out of time, so I might need to cheat a little bit. Right, okay. So that's a good one. So I'm going to I'm going to get the block offset. I have convenience methods for these, but I wanted to show you how the bare API looks like and how you can use patterns to build anything with this. So let's just go through this quickly. That should work. Oh, style list. Oh, there you go. That's that. Right. Unselect style, unselect style. Okay, let's see if this works then. Oh! I screwed up. Where did I screw up? Change is not a function. Why is it not a function? Oh, in here, in the render block. Oh, okay, looks like we're running out of time. So let me just do the cheaty bit. So we've got two, and then I'll just go through it and explain it. We've got 2 bits here. We're using 2 render props, render style and render block. Render style and render block, and then we take the style from our styles object and inject it into our style components block, and we do the same thing in render block. We get the style, we inject it into our style component block, and we render it. And up here, we basically, in onSelect style, we basically get the block and update it, or if the selection isn't collapsed, so if it's a text range, then we update that text range. And this is how this looks like. And now I can have some fun. So let's make this 3 a.m. EM, and let's give it a color. Oh, that needs to be a different header, I think. There you go, and I have my own little typography website builder, whatnot. Yeah. That's pretty much that. And you can still edit it like normal, as you would. Oh, I didn't show you the text ranges. Hold on. So Oh, there you go. There you go. There's the text range. Yeah, that's it. Time's up.
Thank you for talk. We have 5 minutes for questions. Okay.
Thank you for your talk. If I understood you correctly, there's a whole entity map in your editor state that keeps track of all the characters in your current editor.
No. The entity map is a pattern that I took from Draft.js. And it's basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the flyweight pattern. It's like a way to associate an object with a character or a text range, right? But I'm actually removing that bit. I've never been very happy about that because you then need to consolidate and remove bits from the entity map when you remove the text. And so you need to sync these two states and keep track of them. So that's actually something that I'm removing.
Okay, that wasn't my question yet.
All right.
So what I saw in the console was an array of a lot of characters and a lot of different entities. Okay, that's why I thought it was an entity map. So the question is, doesn't it get nasty in terms of performance when you are dealing with like 100 and plus 1,000 characters, for example, if you're using your editor for some vast majority of text?
So I did some exploration there, and the gist is that array performance is really great, actually, because of advances in V8, because of advances in different JavaScript engines. And then also the other thing is, so that was a thought that I had first as well, like will it affect performance? And the other thing is you can optimize arrays. You can, one thing that I'm playing around with but haven't merged into master yet is a chunked array type where you only update and re-render the parts that you change. And so it's totally possible to optimize, I would say, even more so than competing frameworks. You're welcome. Thanks for great questions, by the way.
Thank you for your talk. My question is, as I understand, Zettel is not ready for production, so what your advice to choose as a text editor for some production projects where if you need a rich editor, tables, images, like so. Not so much functionality, but the basic functionality for editor. Thank you.
Right, that's a really good question. I used to say Draft.js, but the thing is, so Draft.js doesn't work with tables. If you probably noticed since you've asked this question, it doesn't have like nested documents, nested structures, and so you can hack it. You can hack it, but it's horrible. It's really, I would not recommend it. I've done this before, and it's a maintenance nightmare. I would say, so I haven't worked with Slate.js recently, but it's improving all the time, and I would give Slate.js a go. It's a steep learning curve. There is a large API, but it's a powerful, really powerful tool, and it really covers every feature under the sun. There are examples of collaborative editing out there as well. as tables and all sorts of things. And I've tested Slate on Android. That's like another issue with Draft, that it doesn't work on Android. And Slate is getting better and better in that respect as well. So I'd give Slate another try. I'd now take it with a grain of salt, because you might find that ultimately you run into too many production issues. But I'd definitely give it a try. There's no straight answer here, I'm afraid. But thanks for the question. Very great, very good question.